Awesome. All right. Thank you all for joining. We are here today to kick off the 2025 CPO Speaker Series. For this is going to be today's session is going to be mainly me talking with our guest speaker, Margaret Millett. I've got a few questions that I'm going to ask her, so it's going to be a little bit more of a podcast interview, and then we're going to have a good conversation and wrap up in about an hour or so. So I wanted to first off thank you for joining us for the kickoff. I'm looking forward to the coming months as well. We've got a lineup of some really great speakers that are going to come to join us. While this is for Continuity Professionals of Ohio, we're the ones hosting, it is not just limited to Ohio, as we were just chatting. We've got folks from various other locations. And that's intentional because the conversation is broader than just an Ohio conversation, obviously, but whether you actually reside in this state or not, you likely are working with people in this state. So it really does show how much of a small world we're part of. And I do believe in getting everybody connected so you can learn who those folks are that you can reach out to. And I've got a question today. So like just about everybody that's joining on this call is somebody I've probably reached out to at some point in time and asked a question, or you vice versa have turned around and asked me a question. So that is the power of building our community. And that's what CPO is about, is building that community. So as part of our speaker series, we're bringing somebody new to you, hopefully every month. It just depends on our queue of speakers that are willing to join builds, but we do have another exciting speaker lined up for February, Jason Haas. Some of you may recognize that name. He's very active on LinkedIn. He's been speaking at several conferences as well. And following him will be Stuart Murray. Also been speaking at several conferences and active on LinkedIn. But today we're kicking off with none other than Margaret Millett. Margaret has been a game changer and leader of the resilience community for several years. I'm not going to date her, but she's and as if you were able to read the bio that we posted with this session, she's got a very broad experience, and so she and I have always enjoyed talking with each other, hanging out together. But I always learn something from Margaret, and I hope sometimes she learns something from me as well. So to that end, we're going to dive into the podcast stuff, part of this. First off, Margaret, if you would like to just do a quick hello and maybe a brief run through of your bio for those that may not have read your bio, and then we can dive into our questions.
Sure. So good afternoon, everyone. And Alice, thank you so much for inviting me to be a guest with you today. So I've known Alice for many years through our affiliation with the BCI. But prior to that, I'm originally from Massachusetts, and I got involved back in business continuity over 30 years ago. I have worked for some large organizations that some of them, you probably know some of the names. I started off my career at Scudder, Stevens & Clark, was one of the first mutual fund companies in Boston. It no longer exists today because it went through a merger and acquisition, but it is part of Deutsche Bank. Then I went to work for Sun Life of Canada. Then I went to work for John Hancock, IBM, Investors Bank and Trust, State Street, eBay, MetLife, and Uber. And along the way, I've gone through 3 mergers and acquisitions and had my position eliminated 3 times. However, I have always loved what I do, so I got involved with volunteering in this profession very early on. In Massachusetts, we had an organization called NEDRIX, the New England Disaster Recovery Information Exchange, and it really got together with all 6 New England states. That unfortunately folded, but it's more similar to like CPO and ACP, et cetera, where we tried to bring together folks for the 6 New England states, because if you look at the geography of Boston, it actually has people who contribute to the workforce coming from basically 5 out of the 6 states. Vermont's the furthest one out. So you could be working with people in Boston who were in the other 5 New England states. And therefore, it was really important for us to understand, we were talking about the weather before Alice formally kicked this off. So, okay, what happens when we're having a major snowstorm? Are we going to have our folks from Connecticut and Rhode Island coming in? What's going to be impacting the train systems, et cetera? So I really felt it was important to do things locally in your backyard, because some of this I am a person of a certain age within the profession. It's before we had the internet and we had all the cell phones and all the bells and whistles that we take for granted today in our profession. And I also wanted to make sure that I was helping others within the profession. So I did get involved with DRI International. I did actually sit on their certification commission for a while, reviewing and approving some of the applications for, at the time, it was just the CBCP and then the MBCI. Helped also develop some of the certifications that they have today. And when I moved overseas to Ireland, I lived overseas when I was working with Investors Bank and Trust in State Street. I had been a member of the BCI for quite some time, but I joined the Ireland chapter, and I had also got involved with the board level governance, risk, and compliance arm of the BCI in London. Did that for a while, and then I moved to California, came back stateside to go to work for eBay, and I was talking with a bunch of people who were very passionate about the BCI, realized we didn't really have a presence here similar to the DRI, so we started and we thought about it, and we formed the first BCI US chapter. So I served with them for 6 years. I've been involved with Women in Resiliency, and I was their previous vice chair. And I've also just, helped out handling hands everywhere. I'm on the DRJ Executive Council, the Continuity Insights Advisory Board. And I'm very proud to say, and Alice was by my side when I got my honorary FBCI in London, and she was by my side when I won my 2023 Lifetime BCI Achievement Award. And I still continue to volunteer, mentor people. So if anybody needs a mentor, look me up on LinkedIn. But still passionate about this profession, and probably will be until the day I really decide to hang it up. So that's a little bit about me. Probably a little too much, Alice, but I thought let me give the background.
No, that's fine. Thank you. I'm going to just a little bit of housekeeping. I would ask that for right now, you go part of meeting etiquette. Make sure you are on mute right now. If you have a question, or you want to ask a question of Margaret or myself as we're going through the conversation, please use the raise your hand feature. That way I will be able to see you, and I can recognize that. That helps us just keep from talking on top of each other, because I want to talk on top of Margaret. I'm already going to say, please forgive me. It's a habit. I try to stop it, but it happens. But if you would please just please, use the virtual meeting etiquette for that. All right, let's dive in. So
Okay.
Margaret, we've had an incredible year of events in 2024. I'm not going to even start naming all of the different events, because I don't want to steer your answer one way or the other. Of all of the major events that have happened in the past year, maybe in the last 2 or 3 years, what do you see as the true game-changing events? What has made us stand back and think and change how we're looking at things, or how we respond, or how we avoid going forward?
So I'm going to take a two-prong approach to answering this question, Alice. I think the first one that I really want to focus in on is the consolidation that we've been seeing amongst vendors. That actually is, in my opinion, a little bit of a game changer, because, I signed up for product A. I liked it. This is what I wanted. I probably looked at product B, but I really wanted to go with A. That's what I signed on the dotted line with. And then all of a sudden, halfway through my contract, I'm seeing that I'm now a client of product B. And this is happening whether it be in the software space that we use to run our programs, or the emergency notification tools. I know there's also more, what I'm going to say, data analytical tools out there to help us with the forecasting of what's happening. But I do think that's a little bit of a game changer for all of us, because I'm going to say this also. We all know that resilience teams are very small. So that's another pile of work that's getting added to your plate, as how do I go deal and navigate the fact that I've now got to determine whether is product A going to still stay at some point a year from now. Am I automatically going to product B, or are they going to run them in parallel? What is happening with my products and services? So I'm going to say this, like anything in life, there are no guarantees on anything, but I think this is also something that we should start to consider when we're writing contracts, to ask some of these questions about what's going to happen? Am I going to get a discount on it? Because also, what happens if product B is more money? I don't want to be given the bill of saying, oh, by the way, you owe me another $5,000 or whatever. And so I think these are things that we as professionals need to start and look at as game changers for us in managing our vendor relationships, because most organizations rely on vendors to help stand up their programs. That is one thing. The second thing, Alice, that I'm going to say, I've been in this business a long time. I'm in my 31st year of doing business continuity management. And I am still dumbfounded after all that has been happening. And I'm just going to say in the last 3 years, okay? Because, like I was talking to somebody. Here was a funny thing. I'm going to digress for a minute. I was at a think tank meeting in Washington, D.C. last month. And I was sitting with two really brilliant young gentlemen who were 25. And I'd love to see where they are by the time they get to be my age. But they were asking me all sorts of questions about Y2K. And they were like, was it really as scary and as bad as they thought it was going to be? And I'm like, yeah, it was, because nobody knew if the lights were going to go on in New Zealand when the clock turned over. I said we had to wait till the last time zone entered. We then were babysitting the code for the entire year to make sure that everything happened month end, or weekend, month end, quarter end, and then year end. So I was like, yeah, it was. So when I hear leadership today say, that can't happen to me, that can't happen to us, I want to sit there and say, it's just a matter of time. And I was actually talking to somebody in North Carolina. And as you recall, we had the big hurricane come through North Carolina this past August. Well, I live in Eastern North Carolina. Luckily, I was spared. But Western North Carolina, which of course is further inland, you wouldn't think that they would have to worry about it. And I know a contingency planner who really wanted to do a hurricane scenario with his executive leadership. And the leadership team was like, we don't need to worry about that. That's never going to happen to us. And then literally 2 weeks later, they were dealing with the hurricane inland. And of course, if you're not familiar with it, there was mass devastation. There's a huge artist colony out in Western North Carolina, and it's been brought to its knees. And so it's one of those where, and the highway's been impacted, one of the major interstates been impacted. So it's going to be one of those things where it's going to take multiple years for that part of the state to get back to where it was and beyond. And it's also going to impact tourism because there's a huge estate out there. One of the Vanderbilt heirs built his estate down there, and it's a huge tourist destination. And I remember looking at pictures after the hurricane came through. The house is fine, thank goodness, but everything around it was impacted. So you're also sitting there saying, do I really want to go to Asheville, North Carolina? Because the cute little towns surrounding it are impacted, and even the community itself is impacted. So, where am I going to go for a local breakfast versus going to Panera Bread? So it's that kind of thing. So I will say this, watch your vendors and continue to remind leadership that what they think can happen could happen. And there's some classic examples out there as well. And, you just look what's going on in the greater LA area today as we speak, devastation happening very quickly. And again, Mother Nature, she can be beautiful, but she can also be very cruel.
And we're dealing, it's just like the rapid fire nature of these events happening one right on top of the other. It's just, you don't even have time to catch your breath.
No, you don't.
And yeah, it was just as you were talking, I was thinking about our friend Linda Nelson, who is all about community resilience. I mean, that is one of her major thrusts. And I'm thinking, yeah, Linda has been preaching this and trying to get this across. We're talking about not only do you look at your at your business and your organization, but it's the community in which you live. I was just seeing some of the videos, over the news of what is taking place in California, and it's, this street may be fine, but that street is just decimated, and it's not just the homes, it's the businesses, it's the whole way of life.
Yeah.
Irregardless of whether insurance covers anything or not, that's another topic.
Yeah.
But what do you think about community resilience? Where have we been missing it, and what should we as part of this profession be doing about that?
I'm going to say, I remember I got my master's degree from Norwich University in business continuity management. Unfortunately, the university's still there, but the program got folded into cybersecurity. But I remember we took a course on community engagement. And, I'll say this, it was one of those where it was the pros and cons of, do people want to have the government involved assisting or not assisting? Because it was one of those of like, do you build a beachfront house or don't you? And I'm just using that as an example. Because again, if you build a house on the beach, you're more susceptible to, the high waters, et cetera, and your house could be out in the ocean or the pond or whatever. And then there's the concern on, I don't want the government telling me what to do, and all of that. But here's what I will say was interesting in the recovery in North Carolina. Depending on who you talk to, you heard that the recovery was fantastic, that FEMA was right in there, that the county agencies were in there, the state of North Carolina was in there, and then there were others saying like nobody was doing anything. So I'm going to say this: you can't make everybody happy. However, I would still like to see, because I say all events start locally, and therefore you have to be sure you're empowered working with everybody to say what I'm going to do is the right due diligence. I also think that a lot of people are guilty of not knowing what their city or towns or their county's plans are. So I also recommend to people that they always get familiar with those to know what they need to know. Make sure that you have the right phone number on file with your local police or whomever so you can get those emergency notifications. I know that, for example, when we have really bad storms that are going to be happening here, I get notices from, my power utilities, my gas company, and I get notices from the police saying, do this, don't do that. If you want to be in the know, you've got to do that. And I think the other thing that I highly recommend to everybody is it's the new year. I always say this about New Year's, make sure you do your credit check for yourself, check all your stuff, but also reconfirm what's in a grab and go bag that you have in your house, so that if you have to leave your home, that you have everything. Because I'm going to say this, I also heard on the radio this morning in California, they were advising everybody who's potentially in the path of the fires in LA to back their car into the driveway. They said, I know it sounds crazy, but it's going to save you a few seconds of getting out of your home if the fire is headed your way. So that's what I'm saying. If you want to get these notices, do it. I do think it's important because, I'm going to say this, I can't be my own protector of when something bad happens. I need to rely on the emergency services in my city, my county, and my state, and potentially the national government to help advise me. I am not an expert on, evacuating or where I'm going to go. So I do think there still has to be that public-private partnership to help us all along and figure out what we're going to need to do and get the communications on where to go and what to do.
I couldn't agree more. It's not only for the organizations, but as we're working with our staff, are we getting this message out to our teams that take care of your personal resilience. Your personal resilience is your first priority, then your business resilience is your second priority.
Right.
And what are the advice and counsel of what to do?
Yeah. And I think there's also enough data, Alice, and I'm not going to use the right statistic, but for every dollar you spend today, you're saving $10 during a real event. So that's where I'm just going to say of like, do what you need to do and get everything that you need. Like, for example, if you don't have batteries, make sure you're getting them and doing all the right things that you should be doing, or getting that, because again, it could save you something when an event actually impacts your neighborhood.
Exactly. Okay, so we've done a year in reflection. We're talked about some, community response, what can we do? Personal resilience. Well, let's look forward now. What do you see looking ahead? What should we be focusing on? What do you see as the future, not only of our profession, but then for our programs as well?
Well, some of that, Alice, I feel like if I knew the answer to that, I should be down at the local convenience store buying the lottery number so I could, really retire from the profession. So I'm just going to give you Margaret Millett's 2 cents worth. I think that we as a profession are struggling. And I think that we're going to continue to struggle until we figure some of this out. And when I say we're struggling, I also mean it's not our fault. Some of it is the management and the companies and the public-private sector areas that we all work in. I look at it as, and I heard this from many people when I attended conferences in 2024, whether I attended conferences here in the US, I was in one in Canada, and I was in London with Alice this past October. Everybody, everybody was struggling to try and get what I'm going to say was their portfolio of ask from A to Z done with a very, very small team. And I'm going to just go back to when I was actually working for corporate America. I started off here, it would be January 9th, 2025. And it's like, okay, here are my top 5 objectives of what I have to get done this year, plus my exercise calendar, plan updates, and blah, blah, blah. The routine. But, we all get thrown those curveballs. We were talking about how there have been a lot more incidents that we may have to go support. So that's the challenge also. You've had a lot of change in leadership teams at organizations. So you think you're going this way, you get somebody in new that says, let's go this way. So I think that it's very hard for us as professionals to try and, get it together, which I then worry about as burnout for people within our profession, because there's so much going on at the office, that's just at work, that doesn't entail the personal life. So I do think that I hope leadership starts to wake up and smell the roses, that they have to devote more time and resources and money to help business continuity continue to thrive. Because any organization I've worked at, I'm amazed at how many people are in HR, legal, finance, cyber, and they're trying to get business continuity. Because when I talked to many people last year, they were all running on a team of like 5 people for these big global organizations, or if they were larger, maybe 8 to 10. So I think that's the issue that we have to overcome. And I'm going to say there's 2 other things, well, 3 other things. Regardless of where you are in the world, there's been a lot of change in leadership in countries. We just had Justin Trudeau of Canada step down. The Chancellor of Germany stepped down last December. December he stepped down. You still have we had a new president in Mexico come on board. So I'm just saying we have a lot of uncertainty as to what's going to be, the new policies coming out of these governments. And I think that could also continue to impact our ability on supply chains, depending on what's going to be happening with tariffs and trade agreements and things like that. And I also still will say this. I think that we are going to continue to have a very volatile year with incidents based on, the fact that climate change is continuing to evolve. I did hear that last year there were more climate change related incidents than I thought they were based on how they've been tracking them. And the 1 in 100 phenomenon is now becoming the 1 in 5 year phenomenon.
Yeah, and we can't understate that, quite honestly, because it's the state of where the world is. The pace of change. Technology is great, but with technology has come that increasing pace.
Yeah.
And that constant change. We always have dealt with change, but the pace has increased.
Yes.
And I don't see it slowing down.
No.
Quite honestly, when COVID hit, I think that's the only pause we got. And that wasn't a pause.
No, because there were still other things that were going on.
Right. I mean, the ripple effect came out of that, and then all of the things that teams had to do. But from a perspective of the world as a whole, it was a big pause button. Well, now, we geared back up, and everything's changed. So it's you learn from the past, but what we're learning and what we take forward is different now than what it was even 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
Because as we're moving forward, it's just normal that you're going to deal with probably your polycrisis is the normal now. Yeah. Every day is a polycrisis of some sort.
Yep.
So that brings me back to, we were touching on personal resilience, talking from the community perspective. But as we look ahead going into 25 and beyond, I'm really looking at, we've got to make sure we take care of ourselves and take care of our families and our colleagues.
Yes,
We've got to look out for each other.
we do. And I think that's also one, I've always said to my, like, I will share this with you. I have been told when I have been a people manager, and again, I just sit there and like, oh, okay, interesting comment. I've been told I care too much about the teams I manage.
Whoa.
Because, yeah, because, for example, I want to make sure that everyone's taken care of, and so, like, when I've worked with some teams, we're in different time zones, or I've worked with employees who had to deal with, either children or parents or animals, and I'm like, okay, so if you've got to do the drop off for school, I know that you might not be available from say 7:30 to 8:30. We'll make it work, or you need to go pick up at 2, whatever. And so, but I know that if I said I need you on a call at 7:30, they're going to rearrange things because they know today's the day that I need you for something. Or I'm also like, hey, instead of me presenting, I'll kick it off, and then I'm going to hand it over to Alice because she's on my team, and I really want to get her out there, and I want her to get her exposed to leadership. Because the other thing is if they don't know who Alice is on my team, and then I get to year-end performance and I talk about why she should be on a scale of 1 to 5, a 5, or why I think Alice should get promoted, they'll be like, Alice who? And so I want to go do that. And I've also said my job is to get you to your next job. So that's where I want to make sure I'm getting you promoted either on a resiliency track or elsewhere within the organization. Or if you tell me you want to do an entire change of career, I want to then work with you to keep you with me as long as possible. And then when you then have to cut bait because you need to go to school full time, bye-bye. Thank you very much. Good luck. Stay in touch. But I also think that it's really interesting that we need to start and tell leadership, like, we can't be the ones who are going to be available 24/7, 365 to manage every event. And I will say this, that I have made the push when I've been leading crisis management to get it to what I'm going to say, the central security team, because they are working 24/7, 365. They have the shifts, they're doing the monitoring. Let's get them trained. I'll provide the tools, templates, and methodology on crisis management. Let's get you trained on how to go run an incident. I'll come in as needed, but you're there, learn how to use the emergency notification tool. If we need to get things assembled more, that's great. But they're also the ones that are dealing with what I'm going to say the low-hanging fruit before it becomes a real major event. But let's use that. And also, if we're going to truly do this, let's implement a true follow the sun model. Let's not do a siloed APAC one, EMEA, and then the Americas, because that kills me too, Alice, when it's like, I only can tell you what's happened in EMEA, and we don't do the same thing when we hand over to the Americas, because otherwise we're not going to have follow the sun. So I'm going to say do that. But then I also think that sometimes you just kind of need to put the boundaries out to leadership. Like, we can only do this. Like, I look at it as, again, we're professionals, we're doing our job. Technically, you should only have 1, maybe 2 major incidents a year. So therefore, I shouldn't be working, Friday night from 7 to 11. I shouldn't have to get up on Sunday morning at 3 a.m. I shouldn't have to do all this, because that is then not really a crisis. That is what I'm going to say, the BAU stuff. And therefore, we have to figure out how to manage the BAU. And that doesn't necessarily mean it's the resiliency team that's got to come to the rescue, because, again, I don't have underneath this shirt my little Wonder Woman outfit. I never would fit into it anyway, Linda Carter. Good for you on that body figure you have. But you know what I'm saying? I don't have my superhero costume on underneath.
Well, I think that's a great point, because, we're used, you made a comment earlier, we have small teams typically, and there's very few companies that have the privilege of having a large team, and it's, I'm not going to go down that path right now because that'll take me another line of questioning, but we're small teams. We can't all do it ourselves. We have to delegate. We're facilitators. We aren't the doers.
Yeah.
And it's our job is to manage expectations of what is capable, make sure that we get those that are accountable for the day-to-day and keep it going, make sure they've got what they need to do it. We can advise and counsel, but they own it. And it's that accountability is so important, because if we continue to run everything, then they're never going to learn.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, Alice, is you're right. It's that collaboration because, like, for example, I always try and work with my business partners. Like, what report do you need from me out of my emergency, my business continuity planning tool, or how can I help train you? Like again, on the 24/7 staff there, like, no offense, each shift should be playing phone tag, no pun intended, with the tool, so that every staff, every shift is familiar with it. Because again, I'm still always amazed of, like, yeah, we got this covered, but I'm like, yeah, it's the day shift that has it covered, not the augmented shift. And, it's not like everybody rotates. I mean, I've worked at some companies where, you do rotate through the 3 shifts, but then I've worked at other places where, I work the 3rd shift. And so they assume nothing's going to happen on the 3rd shift. But then when it comes to it, it's like, then you're answering, the business continuity team, are the ones answering the question to leadership of, like, why did it take an hour for that call to get out? Normally it takes 30 minutes. And it's like, I'm not the one working the 3rd shift. They told me, again, how much babysitting do we need to do of others to say that, you're accountable, you're doing your job, that you are managing things? Because, again, we can go in and read the reports and see that nobody on the 3rd shift is actually practicing using the tool, but yet we're the ones that then get into the hot seat of why something took longer when an event unfolds.
Yeah. Makes life so much interesting.
Yeah.
So we've talked about where is the profession going. AI is the magic silver bullet.
Yes, I was going to talk about that.
Yeah. So I'd like to hear your thoughts about that, because I know when Jason comes on in February, we're going to be talking about we're diving into the details on AI, but I want to hear your thoughts on it, because I know we've had a variety of conversations in this space. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on what's good about it. What do you think we're going to use, and what should we be focusing on going forward?
So here's what I have found interesting, Alice. I've talked to a lot of people about AI, and I don't mean the super IT people like Jason Haas, because Jason and I are not on the same level playing field by any stretch of the imagination. And I hope I'm not going to cause you to spit your tea out, Alice.
No, I'm good. I swallowed.
No, but you know what I'm saying. Jason is very technical, so when you get on the phone with him, you'll be like, "Oh yeah, Margaret could barely, plug in the computer." But when I talk to people, they're telling me that they can't use AI yet at their companies because it hasn't been sanctioned. And I know, I'm sure it's being looked at and played around by others within the IT department. But then I've turned to them and said, are you using it in your personal life? And I hear no. And I'm going to just say this again, like, you could go on to Google and say, could you give me a chocolate chip recipe for gluten-free or something? And, you'll see that it starts to say it's AI generated. But, if you haven't set up a chat GBT account, then go ahead and start to play with it, because it is really interesting. Because I did start playing with AI about, I'll say, 6 months ago, and I wanted to go create a risk assessment just to see what it was like and how it really was. Because I'm going to be honest with you, I was a novice to AI and probably should still say I'm in the newbie category. But what I learned is you really have to get smart about what you're asking it, refining the question, telling it to do this, change that. So if you're not good at prompting it for the commands, you're not going to get what you want for that final output. Now, I'm going to say this. I did actually build the risk assessment, and I got a really good risk assessment. And it took me, like, I'm going to say this, it was me also playing and learning how to work with it. But I think if I extract out my learning curve, I think I got a pretty good risk assessment with what I wanted, fully built by AI in less than 2 hours. So granted, take out my learning curve. But if you were to then go back and say, sit down with Excel and create that yourself, that would probably 2 days head down, not getting interrupted, to go really truly build a risk assessment. So what I'm saying is it can be a time saver for you. And I do think that AI is going to also help with running our exercises. I think it can help you craft it and do the illustrations of the videos or whatever. But again, it's what version you have, because I'm also learning with the AI. There's what I'm going to say, the Yugo, the Chevy, and the Cadillac version of it. I'm using the Yugo version because it's free, but I'm sure if I had the Cadillac version, I'd get more bells and whistles. So I will say, we've got to get out, embrace the AI. And also another thing, Alice, is I think it's important to understand, and this is where I don't know enough about AI, but who's going to be keeping track of keeping it current? Because I'm also looking at AI, and again, this is Margaret Millett's terms. AI is kind of like Wikipedia. It's only going to be as good as the data that's in there. So if all of a sudden we find out that we're no longer being called business resilience and the correct term for our profession is, business gurus, who's making that change so that when I go try and get information, I'm getting something that's relevant, because I don't want to go give a presentation to either an Ohio contingency planners meeting or a DRJ or my leadership saying business resiliency when really I should be saying business gurus. That's my concern about that. And then also, how do you source it?
Yeah, because it's like, oh, ChatGPT. Well, is that a valid source, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, or again, what I'm also just getting is, where's ChatGPT getting their data from? Because I also know if you go look at Wikipedia, it doesn't give you, the facts and figures of saying, hey, this is the material of, how much food is produced in the state of Ohio, where they would probably say the agricultural air department of the state of Ohio, where ChatGPT will just say, that state produces 500,000 pounds of wheat every year.
Right.
Where's the source?
Exactly.
Yeah.
How are you going to how do you trust but verify? It's
correct.
that verify piece.
Yeah.
So that takes me straight into security and cyber resilience. What are your thoughts about I had a sidebar. I had a very interesting conversation this morning. I was doing an FBCI assessment interview for an individual that wrote an article about cyber resilience culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd like to hear your thoughts on what is cyber resilience and what do we as resilience professionals need to be aware of and be looking at going forward?
Well, interesting on the term cyber resilience, because I always look at cyber teams as being over here, the business continuity here. I have worked for the CISO for the majority of my career, where I'm, again, I'm in this row, they're in that row, hear everything. We do play nicely together. They do their exercises, I do mine. They do the secret squirrel stuff, I overhear it, pretend not to hear it. What I think really needs to happen, though, is there's still so much a focus on the cybersecurity out there. And then I'm going to just say, if we're really going to try and achieve what I'm going to say, the operational resilience, we really need to have that all come together. And it's not just cybersecurity, but I do think that cyber needs to understand. I don't want to become a cybersecurity person because that's another skill set, okay? But I do think that they need to come together better at the table so that they can understand how we can come together, that they understand what are the critical business functions, what are the critical applications, when they need to be up and running, and what happens if they start to see activity. Because I often find that sometimes they're trying to mitigate everything on their own. They're going to try and save everything. They're going to try and mitigate it. And then we realize, like, oh, we got a problem. And then they're going to try and bring it to us. But so much time is unfolding where if they had known some of this sooner rather than later, they might have come forward to say, we do have some mission critical functions and applications that are starting to get impacted. Let's get together for activating the plans, getting the crisis communications ready so that we can get ahead of the curve, get the customer service reps prepared with what the communication is going to be, get comms out there to be ahead of it, and also be ahead. Where I also find that they go do exercises to check the box for the executives and the board of directors, but they do them by themselves. And so they don't really do the type of exercising that we do, where we will bring in other areas and they are over there. And sometimes when you invite them to it, they don't want to have that seat at the table. And I'm not sure why, because I will say this, I've worked with some great cybersecurity teams, so I know they know their stuff inside out, but it's like, it's okay to come play in our sandbox. We're not going to throw sand at you, and hopefully you're not, but we've got to do a better job of coming together. And I think some of this also just ties into all the other areas that are part of operational resilience. And I think some of this also just ties to the fact that you've got different executives managing all these other teams. Therefore, to come together, I might have to give up a slice of my pie. I might impact my ability to get a better bonus, bigger raise, all these things. And that's where some of these things sound great on paper, but they're very hard to implement when you're talking about getting together. I'm just going to say 10 departments, that maybe 3 or 4 executive vice presidents. Therefore, it's not all going to come together. And I'm going to end on this note, Alice, for this question, but this is where we have heard, I want to say I've heard at least for 10 years now about having a chief resiliency officer. It's not become what I call a true C-suite person. It's sometimes not even there at all. Or if it is, it's embedded underneath another C person. So it's got the seat at the kid table, not the adult table. And that would be really nice if we got there and that they could truly take control out of all these functions and that everybody could realize, like, when we have an event, this is the team that needs to be calling the shots. We have to agree on what the chain of command is going to be and what we're going to need from everybody to make it work. And this is how we as an organization need to be doing these exercises in tandem during the year so that we are prepared. And we need to do these regionally, because again, if you're working for a global company, the folks in EMEA should be able to go handle something at 3 o'clock in the morning local time while you're still sleeping.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. And it's one thing that I've said a lot of time in many different venues and presentations is we don't have the luxury of time anymore where we could all operate individually and separately. We have to work together. It really is organization resilience. It's operational resilience. It's getting all of the disciplines to work together. Each discipline has their specialty. Cyber has their specialty, and I don't want to get in the details of what they do, but they have to know what on the technical resilience side, what do we have to do to keep the engine running? And then we have to know, okay, to keep the business operating, we need to know where our touch points are in that communication and that command chain flow, etc. If we don't come together, then our ability to actually weather the storm, whatever that storm may be, is just completely compromised. So
and I think another thing, Alice, is the right communication, because I'm sure we've all logged into the website and we've had it spin or it's timed out saying, or it's down for maintenance or whatever. But I'm going to say this on CrowdStrike. I got up and I was having my coffee and it was a Friday morning in August and, wasn't quite thinking, and I'm hearing some stuff and I'm like, all right, people in the continuity realm are really working hard. But I also got an email from Land's End saying they were having a sale and I was like, oh, let me go check it out. And then I was looking at something and I was like, well, maybe I'll buy this. So I started to, fill up my cart, and they had a great message saying, we've been impacted by CrowdStrike. Please check back later on. And I was like, kudos to Land's End for getting out there with a great message to their customers to let them know, like, you are not going to be able to check out today or this morning.
Right. It's like, own it. Don't try and hide it. Yeah. Because the customer's going to figure it out.
Yeah.
Definitely. We are at a quarter till the hour, so I want to open it up. What questions does everybody else have? I mean, Margaret, can you tell Margaret and I could go on all day long? We have so much that we could discuss, but I'd like to see, does anybody else have a question or comment that you'd like to make based on all the things that we've already talked through? Don't be shy.
It can be about anything. Well, within the realm of resilience.
Yeah. You can all come off mute if you want. Come on, don't be shy. Somebody's got a question. I know you do, or a comment at least. Go, Aaron, you're off mute.
Yeah, I have a question. Just and really to both of you in all your years of experience, do you have a specific vendor for business continuity that you recommend, or a specific program that you recommend?
I'm not sure what you mean by a specific vendor or program. Could you clarify that a little bit?
Sure. A program that might house your business continuity plan and might have.
Oh, you mean a software product?
Correct.
Okay. Correct. I'm gonna say this. That's a hard one to answer, Aaron, because here's where I've been boxed into. Okay. Sometimes I've had to use a product that somebody else already bought and signed the contract for that I inherited. So sometimes I'm living with what's been already there. I've also worked at companies where some of the large products that we all have in-house, they actually have a component for business continuity. Therefore, we already own it. So therefore, that's what you're using. And I'm going to say this, and if any of the vendors in the industry are listening, please don't take it this way. All of the products are great. They all have a few downfalls. You just got to understand, the ins and outs, and also make sure that you are diligent in getting out there and really having that vendor relationship as well as the customer relationship, so that you can understand how it works. The other thing that I also say to people when they're going to go out to market to go buy a product, make sure you've got your client questionnaire of what you want to know about the product. So I always tell everybody to go look at 4 companies. Okay. You got to compare apples to apples, not, apples to oranges. I always say 4, one that you kind of know that you're just going to say right off the bat, that's not the one that I want. Then you have the third one to try and then leverage with the other 2. And then you realize that's not the product you want. But then you've got what I'm going to say, the good leveraging power between the final 2. And, I'm just going to say this one's offering me milk and cookies every Friday at 3. What are you doing for me? So that, you can leverage that with them. Ask those questions. Okay. But the other thing that I always ask of a vendor, whether I'm buying a software product or an emergency notification tool or whatever new tool comes in within the market within our realm, I'm a business continuity professional. You heard me say to Alice earlier, I'm not IT. I'm not Jason Haas. I'm giving a lot of plugs to Jason Haas. So, but what I'm getting at is I need a job description of what it means to run that product, because oftentimes I might get some assistance from IT or the project management team when I'm doing the implementation, but I need to know what it makes to make that work day after day after I've got that. And also, this is where I might need to go to my leadership and say, you know what? I do need an IT related person to help run this product, because I need to worry about the HR feeds, or I need to make sure that, it's doing the data cycle, a clean out of, people are leaving today on Friday, new hires are starting on Monday. I need a new customized report for leadership that's going to pull here, here, and here. Again, I don't want to be taking my time of my resources, who are business continuity professionals, to all of a sudden become a product specialist.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's, and I can echo back on that. Years ago, we had some extra money in the budget, and I got the opportunity to go get a software package in to help run the program. And there was only one real product available at that time. Purchased that product, brought it in, did all the customization, get it all ready to go, and then came to realize, just based on what Margaret was just saying there, that we needed at least 1, if not 2, full-time equivalent staff to operate it and handle the day-to-day maintenance to keep it in sync. We spent in the 6 digits.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Not before the decimal point, 6 digits for this software package. An incredible amount of staff time to put it in place. And we turned around and walked away from it because I couldn't add the head count to maintain it.
Yeah.
So,
Wow.
yeah, that was painful.
I
I would mention the name, but it would only get a chuckle or 2 out of those that have been in the industry for a while. There were 4 letters. Those that might know what I'm saying. Well, I know Joni's probably laughing her head off at the moment, but it's.
I'm not saying anything.
I know you're not saying a word, girl.
But it
yeah,
also gets back down to Alice, we should be practicing what we preach, and that is to make sure that you have a backup. And, I have had all my eggs in one basket for the person who does that work. And like, they've either gone out on maternity or paternity leave, they go on vacation, something happens, or, they don't really know the product. So they tried to write some code on their own. And then we're sitting there scratching our head of, oh, tag, you're it, Alice. Can you try and figure out what Aaron did and try and decode it? And, then it's like, OMG, what have we just done here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it just depends. There are lots of there are a lot more options out on the market today.
Yeah.
So but to your point, it's basic project management when you're looking for a new vendor. Make sure you've got your requirements well understood.
Yeah.
In fact, I would advise you to pick on the brains that are even on this call and others that you may know. Just to kind of walk through your requirements with you before you go out and do the RFP process.
Oh, even better than that, Alice. I go to the vendor saying, "Can you give me sanitized RFPs from clients that you think are the best ones?" Because if you want me as a client, you can start working for me now, even though I haven't signed on the dotted line.
There you go. Yeah, and if they want that sale, they'll do it.
They will, and they do,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I will say, having the years that I've been at one employer now for 42 years, so I get more exposure to everything throughout vehicle, platforms such as this. But I have operated my programs using the Microsoft Office suite all along, except for that one short period. So I would love to have a software program that I could leverage that would have all the data in it, so I could do all of the data mining and so forth. I mean, there's so much value to that information that I could pull out of that if I had the right platform with it all running there and being kept current with just normal day-to-day change. So I support going after software, but also know if you can manage with what you have until you get there. So,
well, and I'm also going to say this, even if you have software or you're using Microsoft Office like Alice, you also have to figure out what the executives like for reporting.
yes.
Most of the organizations I've worked at, they're either using Tableau or Power BI. So I've got to get my stuff into what I say is the look and feel that they're going to be familiar with. And you want to have the similar report look and feel as others within the organization. Again, if they like bar graphs, well, then use bar graphs, don't use pie charts, whatever. You've got to make sure that you're flowing in line, because you don't want to be like, I don't understand this, and move on, and they don't. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Aaron. That was a great conversation starter.
Sure.
All right. Any other questions or comments anybody would like to add?
Oh, come on. It's in the afternoon. It's not the morning. Everybody's had their coffee or their afternoon tea or whatever.
And we've woken up from that nap that we were lulled into after lunch. Well, if there aren't any other questions or comments, first off, I'm going to say thank you, Margaret. Always fun
Alice.
to have the conversation.
Angela, were you going to ask a question? I thought you came off mute.
I was, Margaret.
Oh, please
Go for it.
Please go.
So is there any other recommendations that anyone has, especially Margaret and Alice? They've been so fantastic. Thank you so much for community engagement. I know you talked about, knowing our own city and local response and plan. And personally, I've done that, right? I have my go bag.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that we can do in our businesses to kind of promote that? I know at my old company, we did great around September because we could promote National Preparedness Month and bring in, we brought in, charity organizations to talk about how do you, rescue your pets during an emergency, or partnered with, that kind of way. Is there any other opportunities there?
So I'm going to say this, figure out what's the right month, because I'm going to say, I know September is preparedness month. Angela's right, but sometimes September is not the greatest month. And I'm only going to say this is because we're coming off the summer. People have their kids back at school or university. It's also like, hurry up and let's get all this work done before the end of Q3. We're getting ready for planning for year end and the next year. I'm going to say, be bold and go do whatever you think is right for you and your organization. If you think the first week in April is really the sweet spot, then make that your preparedness week or month or whatever. Also, I will say that I think it's the third week in May that the BCI does Business Continuity Awareness Week. They usually pick a theme. It changes from year to year. But, I've actually, created my own awareness week of myself at the companies, because also September has also got something tied to cyber. So sometimes I get overshadowed by the cybersecurity team. So that's why I'm saying, go do your own thing and go make it happen. Angela is right. Most of the nonprofits, whether it be your police, fire, Red Cross, whatever, they do actually have a community relations arm, and they would be happy to come into your organization and talk about preparedness. So if you haven't had some of those conversations and want to find out more about what you can do or what the lead time is to get them there, then you should start and go have some of those conversations with them. I'm going to literally say it this month, so you can forecast out what you think you should do for your company.
I agree with you there. And also just a plug back around on that public-private partnership. We're actually going to have the new head of Ohio Public, it's OP3, come in, and they are funded by Department of Homeland Security. So it is part of, it's federally funded program at the state level, where he's gonna come in and speak to us about what is happening across the state. But also another great organization to tap into is InfraGard, to get a lot of what's happening from the FBI. And it's still going to be very cyber intense focus, but it's information that you can tap into, but then you can bring it back to your organization and make it applicable to your organization. It's a part of building that organizational culture and getting, what is that tone? One thing I have found that is really important is keep things more in soundbite mode. Just, like short videos or just a short, message, as opposed to somebody, if I have to read 3 pages, it ain't happen. Just saying.
I think you're right, Alice. 3 is a sweet spot for most people.
Exactly. So I would keep that in mind, but yeah, to your Margaret's right. Pick the time that's right for your organization. It's about building that culture. There's a lot of more thought leadership coming out on this space. If you haven't set up a web account with BCI, please go right ahead and do it. It's thebci.org. Check it out. There's a lot of articles available there. There's more coming out. In fact, the new GPG, we renamed one of the practices of it's embracing BC instead of embedding, it's embracing. And it's really focused on building that culture, that resilience culture within an organization. And it really goes into a lot of what we've talked about here. So there's going to be, it's a space to watch. But if you want to be getting ahead of the game and maybe being a change catalyst versus always the follower, and response oriented, be more proactive, start looking at things of that nature. And it'll be a lot of work up front to get it up and running, but the dividends will pay off greatly in the long run. We are at time.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. And I have
time flies and I'm having fun with the Ohio contingency planners.
But thank you again, Margaret. It's been a pleasure having the conversation. Thank you all for joining. Like I said earlier, Jason's going to be joining us. That is actually scheduled on Valentine's Day, February 14th at 2:00. So come spend another hour with us, and the schedule will be coming out more going forward. And thank you again. Have a great rest of your day, and talk to you next time. Thanks,
Great.
all.
Thank you. Look me up on LinkedIn, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
I'm going to stop the recording.